Mining Guild Record Log, number 3346. This message is for the city's nobles. My name is Lumen Arist. I was the senior officer for the Skikart Mining Guild here on Ulma, but something changed. For weeks now, I thought I was going crazy, hearing sounds of running or scratching along with whispers from the shadows whenever I entered the mines, but no, I wasn't going crazy, it was all real. I was doing a routine inspection, checking up on all the machinery we use and the workers we employ. I thought many of them were getting sick with odd skin coloration and mutations, but I couldn't have been more wrong. During this routine inspection, I heard an odd low hum. It was never really odd to hear machinery buzzing during this time, but it was no machinery that I could recognize. In fact, there was a distinct lack of mining noises at all. So I ventured deep into the cave to trace it to its source. The further I traveled this rocky cavern, the louder it became, enveloping the entire chasm, almost like it was surrounding me. But the more I listened to this noise, the more it became almost intoxicating. I found myself hooked like a fish on a line, drawing myself closer to whatever was making this sound. That is, when I saw light outside one of the cave's many bunkers, with a giant symbol of a monster shaped in some kind of circle was painted on it. The sound was getting close to deafening when I got to the door. As I placed my hands on its heavy steel frame and started to open it, the noise stopped. Silence filled the air, almost as if time itself had stopped in that very moment. Even more confused now, I pushed the door all the way open, only to see a congregation of my entire workforce in this dim, candle-lit room. Everyone's skin and faces covered in shadow, their yellow eyes pierced through me. Those faces that I could see were mutated and purple. The entire group stared at me, as if I had just walked into a crime scene. But that's when I finally saw it. This great, hulking beast, twice the size of any man, with 4 massive arms and a tail. This thing was no longer human, if it was human at all. After a second that felt like an eternity, I took a step back, and that's when it lunged at me, covering the large distance in seconds. I tried to turn and run, but with its sharp claws and talons, it pinned me to the floor. Its face, shown in the light of the doorway, was hideous, with a giant exposed pulsing brain and a devilish sharp-toothed grin. It stared directly into my eyes. I tried to scream, the adrenaline rushing through my head. I was sure this would be my death at the hands of this creature. I watched as it reached a sharp talon out. Gritting my teeth and shutting my eyes, I prepared for the end. I felt the sharp point of its claw press into my forehead, leaving a small bleeding cut. But that's when something changed. I felt the panic, the fear, the anxiety, all fled away from me over a sea of calming tides. It was almost as if the creature was speaking to me. It showed me that it was not there to hurt me, that it only wished to liberate me and my kind. The thoughts morphed under the beast's influence, showing thoughts of anger, but not towards the creature or my workers, but towards the Imperium. How they exploited us for our labor and would cast us aside as soon as we weren't useful to him. But this thing helped me understand that the true Emperor was out there, with his army of angels among the stars, and that they would come to free us, to save us from this wretched world. I could barely believe it. But as I thought about all the pain that my workers and I have been through, how the Imperium has treated us like nothing more than slaves, I was burning with anger. I, for the first time in my life, felt love and compassion from a higher power, and I was ready to fight for the freedom and peace we so desperately deserved. So to hell with your Imperium, and may you burn as we ascend with our 4 armed Emperor. So in the past couple of months, I found myself really hating humanity. We're so small-minded and full of taxes. So instead of filing my W-2 like the IRS wants me to, I decided to join a cult that worships aliens, who want to consume all life in the galaxy. Just hear me out for a sec. Now you may be asking, Gabe, why would I want to join a cult that just wishes to be devoured by aliens? And to that I say, why don't you stop being a bitch? Genestealer cultists don't really see it as being devoured. Even if they know that's what's going to happen, they see it as becoming ones with the true gods of the universe, joining the Holy Four-Armed Emperor in his crusade to unify the galaxy. In his small intestine, or sometimes they don't know, and they find out very quickly that they made a mistake. They see the Imperium of Man as the corrupt, cancer-ridden society we all know it is, and how everything the Imperium does leads to nothing but death and chaos. Not you. So, instead, they learn the way of the space bug, slowly amassing more and more over the generations, all under the Patriarch's influence, until they finally have enough cultists to stage an uprising against the very same world they call home. And I, for one, am all for it. Fuck the Imperium of Man. All they did was turn my grandma into corpse starch, which I then had to subsequently eat. I'm sorry, Grandma, you tasted like shit. But on a more serious note, I do love the Genestealers. They bring this unique guerrilla warfare, rebellion style to a fun strategic army, and it culminates to be one of, if not my top favorite army in all of 40k. The unfortunate part about 40k and its many factions is that not all of them can be mom's favorite child. And while GW does try to give everyone their equal slice of 40k pie, it's not always going to happen. And unfortunately for us alien-loving weirdos, we actually ended up with a rather thin slice. Now that does sound bad, but it's not all terrible. While Genestealers aren't the biggest bad like Necrons, Tyranids, or Orcs, they still are an ever-looming threat that are virtually impossible to eradicate, meaning this faction isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But Gabe, what makes the Genestealers so hard to kill? Well, the Genestealer cult isn't one single cult like the Adeptus Mechanicus, but is actually made up of many smaller cults that litter Imperium worlds like parasites, all worshipping the ever-growing Tyranid hive fleet. It all starts out with just one Tyranid, which the cult deems the Patriarch. This one bug sneaks onto unsuspecting worlds by any means, such as trade ships, asteroids, or with a good old hitchhiker's thumb. When on the planet, it will find a nice secluded hiding spot far away from any public eyes, such as a sewer, abandoned mine, or your average chronically online basement stink cave. Once settled in, the Patriarch will set out to kidnap and convert citizens of the planet above to his holy congregation, brainwashing the civilians through ethical methods. Then he will use the converted civilians to lure and kidnap even more people to him to continue the brainwashing. Throw in some crossbreeding, a few genetic abnormalities later, and boom, you got yourself a well-functioning Genestealer cult. Now, these people aren't just mindless followers. The Patriarch opens their eyes, showing them how truly corrupt and awful the Imperium of Man really is, and how ascending with the loving alien gods is way better than being squashed under the Imperium's boot. Once the cult reaches critical mass, they plan and enact a revolution, closing off ship ports, disabling defenses, and calling forth their brood brothers and sisters so that they may retake the planet in the name of their glorious brood family. During their day of ascension, the Patriarch will send a "my parents aren't home" text to the hive fleet, causing the entire cult to rejoice as alien gods save them and every other living thing on the planet. For me, I like to believe that it's true devotion and faith that brings them to their end at the hand of the Tyranids. And while yes, they are brainwashed, I like to think that it's not just mindless brainwashing or blinding ignorance. I like to think that they truly change their minds and truly believe in the Tyranids as gods. However, there is a whole nother view to this, one where these people are blind to what's happening to them and their world, and how these people brought these monstrosities from space onto an innocent planet, killing everyone. And that view is super interesting, and I really like both takes. In the book Day of Ascension, the main character struggles with anxiety and worry, questioning her faith in the alien hive race she and her whole brood family have dedicated their entire lives to, wondering if they are truly just monstrous beasts and not gods, only for her to reaffirm her faith by the end of the book. It really does give a ton of character to the cult, and is currently one of my favorite 40k novels I've read to date. This just in.
A so-called Genestealer cult has started a revolt against our own planet, calling it their Day of Ascension. The cult is a small force that will use whatever they can to combat oppression, fighting back against the man with mining equipment, service vehicles, or never-before-seen war crimes. All of that, along with some relentless guerrilla warfare tactics, means that any world they revolt against won't hold out for very long, and I really can't help but find it inspiring. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a corrupt world to save, and some Imperial rule to overthrow.
Those aren't his lines. Do we have to cut him off? Man, those aren't your lines.
Model-wise, this is an excellent roster. Even though compared to some of the main factions, it's rather limited, our models are beautiful and boast some amazing detail and creativity. From alien body horror to well-used mining lasers, and even some nice bald baddies.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
I truly love these models, especially with the Pure Strain remake. The cults have never looked so good. Genestealer cult models look great and are fun to paint. The painting downside is that virtually all our models have a ton of small and changing details, and while that is great for having nice unique models, it makes it a huge time sink to paint, having to cover every small thing if you want the model completely painted. But I've had the most fun I've ever had painting models with these cult models. With this bright purple pink tunic, white armor, and pink to skin tone layered flesh, I love how they look. And with my more recent red and bluish green aberrants and acolytes, my army looks incredible, and is definitely eye-catching. This is probably the most proud of an army I've ever been. However, if you do hate painting faces, this army has a lot of them. They do cover up a good part of them with goggles or gas masks or something, but just about half or more of your models are going to have faces on them, so if you hate doing that, well, it might not be the best idea to get into Genestealers. In 9th edition, the Genestealer cult relied mostly on the guerrilla warfare tactics side of the story, using crossfire and better placement than your enemy to their highest advantage. However, in 10th edition, GW said,
"Make them better Necrons."
The Genestealers were really lucky with 10th changes, having a respawn mechanic that terrorized the beginning of the edition. And though it did get kicked in the balls with a heavy nerf, I still think it's pretty lore accurate and a blast when it works. Cult Ambush allows you to have a chance to respawn certain Cult Ambush units with an easier time respawning battle line units, and if it's within the first 2 rounds. Giving the cult that endless swarm I think they needed. Plus, they still have some of their guerrilla warfare tactics with some crossfire-esque stratagems and abilities. Nothing says alien-worshipping cult like watching the same unit climb back out of the sewer for a 3rd time.
Bonnie, how do you keep getting back in?
It's no secret Genestealers got hit with a bit of a heavy nerf, chunking their respawn ability and handing out some pretty heavy point increases. And while I do think this was well needed, I do believe that point increases were a bit heavy-handed. So really quickly, let's see how I think GW should have handled some of the nerfs. Aberrants didn't deserve it. 1. Acolytes can still respawn with more demo charges, meaning they can demo charge, die, respawn, repeat. And yes, now it's less reliable, but I think fixing them being able to reuse a one-shot weapon would be better than just nerfing points all around. 2. Anything that isn't battle line has very little chances of respawning, especially outside rounds 1 and 2. And it's a really simple fix. I believe a specific stratagem, ability, or enhancement could help make this a little easier so it doesn't always feel horrible rolling for Cult Ambush later in the game. 3. Aberrants are horribly overcosted, and while yes, they are useful, tanky, hard-hitting monsters that can respawn, however, they will never be worth the points. Where they stand now, they are worth as much as 40 Neophytes, 20 Acolytes, 3 Goliath trucks, or 2 Rock Grinders, most of which have demo charges. Whoever at GW thought making my favorite mutant boys this expensive is off their rocker. Personal tangent aside, let's get back on track. Genestealers do have quite the fun roster. We got bikers that can cross the board and move every other phase, crossing distances like a French police officer trying to run enemies over.
He's coming.
I'm not going.
We got powerhouse melee tanks with the Aberrants who can crush anything they come into contact with and can tank hits better than how Sanguinius tanked that hit from Horus. Plus, we have an entire family gathering of characters for you to choose from, like Demoman TF2, Racist Grandpa, and that weird younger cousin who's showing you his brand new Sans hoodie. Although earlier I said we have a small roster of Genestealer models to pick from, we can still soup 25% of our army as Astra Militarum models, meaning any shortcomings our army has can just be filled by robbing the Imperium. That checks out. Need a heavy hitter? Here's a Lehman Russ. Need some more fast dudes? Take these horseback riders. Want artillery? Enjoy literally all the artillery. Along with many stacking buffs and abilities you can give your army by playing correctly and slamming deep strikes, it makes this army a blast and entertaining at every turn. My final complaint's a small one. GW kind of killed our Patriarch. Instead of being the big psychic bug that controls and rules the rest of the cult, it's kind of just a buffed up pure strain Genestealer. I just like my big psychic bug back. But outside of the few and small complaints I listed, the entire army is extremely fun, and I think made the most out of the 10th changes. Not only being pretty good, but being a ton of fun. Playing my rebellious lads has been the most fun I've ever had playing Warhammer, and as a casual goon, it's exactly what I wanted. Fix aberrance. Please, GW. Please! I loved Genestealers for a good bit before 10th edition, and even though I had some initial worry for the army, I think this is going to be a really good addition for us. Now, may the cult live on, and I hope you have a happy day of Ascension.